Yes. Hey, everybody. It is Thursday, September 22nd, 2022. Ben, it's been a New York minute since we've done one. It's been probably 3 months, but, it's been hotter than hellfire this summer, so we want to take off and start it back. And, man, I'm so excited about this podcast. It's probably the best one. No offense to anybody that's been on it, but having this gentleman across the table from me is going to be amazing. He pulled in last night with his rig, his motorhome. He's a special kid to me. It was really nice catching up last night. He is Nicholas Evennou from Annapolis, Maryland. He's my motocross guy from the years in 2000s. Nicky, welcome back to the Wood Gym.
Thank you so much. It's a bit surreal to be here at the moment. So.
Oh, dude, it's really cool, and we're doing some great things, and it's been... just talking to you last time was amazing. It was absolutely amazing just hearing how everybody's grown up. Ben, I had this kid when he was 14 years of age, so I'm ready to just lock and load in this thing. What I usually ask, Nick, and you're an athlete, an extreme sport athlete, what motocrosser, all that stuff. I always ask all my athletes on the show this one statement. We haven't had it in a long time because we've been doing different series. When did you know that you were different?
It was pretty early, actually. I think it would have been, I had to have been maybe 7, 8 years old. It was just something clicked. We got to a local race. Aquasco, Maryland was our track. And it was just one of those things where whole shot, win, domination. And it's crazy to think because I don't even remember certain things that happened today or yesterday. But This is so vividly in my memory that I kind of remember it going, okay, like you click, you can do this. This is kind of easier than you thought. And it kind of just came natural. And it was just this first weekend I won, and then I won the next weekend. And then it was just kind of collectively, I just kept winning locally. And it got to the point where my mom and dad had to make that decision. Okay, are we going to have to like travel out of state now to go race? Pennsylvania, Virginia, Ohio. And we started doing that and realizing, oh, shoot, there's faster kids other than me outside of Maryland. And I think it was between the ages of 7 and 8 when it all clicked. And I won my first national title at 8 years old. So in Branson, Missouri, which is wild that we even made it out to Branson, Missouri, And that's the moment that everything kind of came around. And again, being an 8-year-old kid, you don't know these things. You don't look at them and go, I got this. Like I'm gonna be the next Jeremy McGrath or whatever. Right. But no, it's if you had asked me that same question, I would tell you the same answer every time. Probably between the ages of 7 and 8. I remember just a string of weekends where I just kept winning, and my dad was like, "Okay, we got to move on. Like you don't have no more competition here in Maryland." And no offense to anybody in Maryland racing at the time, but if you know who I was, you kind of knew what was going down there. And I always idolized Travis Pastrana. And he was racing on the same track I was racing. He was on 80s. And
he was basically your neighbor.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So it was kind of one of those things where, I emulated everything Travis did, started training with Gary Bailey. So it kind of all just, then him and I started training together. Then Mini Warriors came out. Then it was just like this snowball effect where sponsors started coming in. And it's just, it's a wild ride, I guess.
Wow. Gary Bailey, Axton, Virginia.
You got it. Memory.
Yeah. Well, I remember that from, my little history of racing. So he's a professional motocross racer, and if people don't know what that is, you explain it. Because you're saying whole shot. Well, you and I know what a whole shot is, but they don't know. So professional motocross, outdoor, indoor, the supercross tracks, the outdoor tracks are longer, more endurance, that type of jazz.
Yeah, motocross, supercross, obviously two different beasts in itself. Everybody can say, hey, it's the same thing. It's very different. Very, very different types of range of movements you need for supercross, different, mental state for everything for motocross. Obviously motocross a lot longer outside, outdoors. When I say whole shot, you have 40 guys at the gate lined up. Board goes sideways, that gate drops, all 40 you guys funnel into one corner together, and the first guy, to that corner is usually the whole shot master. A lot of times people like to say, I got second in the whole shot or something, but that doesn't really make sense to me. You got the whole shot or you didn't. Yeah. It's simple as that.
Yeah, you didn't win 5th place. I hate when people go, I won 5th.
Exactly.
Like, you got 5th, right?
Exactly,
I see that a lot on Instagrams of different categories of sports or whatever. I won 5th. I'm like, no, you didn't. So the whole shot, So motocross, dirt, big air, jumps, turns, whoops. It's very, very demanding on a body. And these guys are, to me, the best conditioned athletes in the world. To me, I know for years the stat was out that soccer was number one in motocross. But if you ever throw your leg around a bike and, even when I was with Mills and I bought my KX250 and went to race, and I was like, this is completely different shape than what I'm used to back in the day or whatever. Forearm pump, you can't, then you're done, then when you're gassed, you're just holding on, trying to make it through, so the training part was huge. So take me through, I still want to hear, like, you're my sport athlete today. So we were in the kitchen last night. We had a great dinner and we were chopping it up about the training and the history and the houses Nick moved with me and the gym, how it got bigger and where it is now. That's all fine, dandy. We'll get into that. But I still want to go through, because you hit on a couple of things that I didn't even know last night. I didn't know that you signed with Fox Racing, which my oldest daughter, Ashlyn, has the Fox Racing jersey on. That's ironic because she wears that all the time. And even the leathers, I have 2 pairs of the Fox red, and she'll wear them out. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's good times. I didn't know you signed a contract at 8 with that. So those things are huge to me. So take me through the 7 to 8. Take me through how you go through it, and take me through how all the way up to where we got to meet when you were 14, 7, 8. And you're mentioning all the, again, me going from New Jersey to North Carolina, I was still racing at that point. So I understand where he was in New York State. I understand where he was in Englishtown, New Jersey. I understand Sleepy Hollow, Fredericksburg, Pennsylvania. I understand a lot of that, of course, Axon, Virginia. And so I get that. Just tell me, see, I didn't know it. We've had so much time together. I didn't know at 7 or 8, like, you're already dominating it, and that's where you were. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think from my early years, kind of when I got going, I had to make some pretty big decisions. And just as we spoke about, between the ages of 7 and 8, that's when I kind of had to make my decision on whether it was motocross full-time, BMX full-time, soccer, or basketball. And I was still in school. I was in 4th grade. And that's a big decision, a big kind of undertaking to kind of, I guess, digest as an 8-year-old, right? You just don't really know. And so when my parents kind of laid everything out, you kind of got to make a decision financially for the family. I picked the most expensive one, motocross. Yeah. So I said, I want to be a motocrosser, so we kind of threw basketball, soccer, and BMX out the door at that time. And we went all in. My dad, took me out of school. My mom and dad homeschooled me from the grade 5th on. And it was motocross every day. I mean, it was wake up in the morning, go running, go jogging, do your little weights. At the time, this is, early 90s. We're talking almost prehistoric now. Mm-hmm. It seems like, and everything was just kind of off a whim. If you're in decent shape, you can do good. You could go, it really didn't matter what you ate at that time. Snickers and Mountain Dews is what we were fueled on. Mm-hmm. And then traveling, across the country was the biggest thing. That was going from Missouri to, qualifiers for Loretta Lynn's to Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, back to Florida. I remember vividly, 6 weeks straight. I was still in school, and this is my last year in school because I got kicked out because I missed 76 days, was on Friday night. My dad would take me to Dulles Airport International, put me on a flight to Orlando, Florida. Davey Millsap's family, if that name sounds familiar. Mm-hmm. Colleen would pick me up, or Big Dave would pick me up at the airport, drive me back to the house.
How'd you guys get to know each other?
Just from racing. Yeah. Just my dad was pretty outgoing, very, very heavy, thick French accent. So maybe a lot of times people couldn't really understand what you were saying. So people kind of just were, kind of open to it. And at the time, we made a lot of friends just from racing all over the country. And Davey and his family were always open arms. And Brian Johnson, we went down there. And so every Friday evening, my dad would take me to the airport, Dulles International, put me on a flight, Orlando. Big Dave or Colleen would pick me up on Friday night.
How old were you?
9, 10. Maybe a little bit older, actually. My timeline, so before we start everything, my timeline on everything I'm going to say might be a little bit dodgy. I'm going to do my best to be
from some severe head trauma?
It may be. So that being said, it's just kind of one of those things where you try to remember as much as you can in the time frame that you can. But I was between the ages of like 10, 12 in this area, no more than 12. And so I'd get picked up. We go straight to the track. We go Saturday morning right to the track, and we get our practice in, and then we race on Sunday, and then Sunday night, Orlando Airport, Dulles International, land Monday morning, go to school all the way for 6 weeks straight. So you imagine I'm going to the airport on Friday evening, flying to Orlando, getting picked up, racing Saturday and Sunday, Sunday night getting taken to Orlando International Airport, flowing to Dulles, my mom and dad picking me up on Sunday night, usually get home around 2 or 3 in the morning, wake up at 7 a.m. for school, for elementary school, go do that Monday through Friday, and then do it all over again for 6 weeks straight, flying at that age, between 10, 11 years old.
And this is when you basically were like, I want to do this.
Yeah, this is essentially like, I got to do this, because I was riding with the nation's top kids, Davey, Brian Johnson, these guys were in every magazine that, that this is what I had to do in order to become great at the sport that I wanted to be great at. And, the times are a lot different now than what they are back, or what they were back then. So when we kind of look at it, there's no comparison to it. We were paying $1,500 for 60s, and we could get away, with blowing an engine up and replacing it, for a couple $100.
Got it.
You do that now, and you're looking at, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 to replace an engine. So it's like 4 strokes have completely changed the scope of our sport and financially how we approach it, and I get asked this question not a lot now as a father is, you're going to be that 50 parent, and
yes. And I'm going to train him if I'm still living. Yes.
It's one of those things where I'm going to let my son do whatever he wants to do at the end of the day. He's going to make his own decisions. He's 3 now, and he loves riding his Stasic, and he loves riding his pedal bike, but he also loves playing hockey. He also loves golf. He loves basketball. He loves soccer, and you're going to let the kid do what he's going to do at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And, I was fortunate enough to have my family kind of go through the same thing with me, and I made my own, which is crazy to think, making a personal decision at 8 years old on your life. If you really think about that, like, you take a step back and you go, you just literally figured out your career at 8. That's wild.
Yeah, full commit.
Full commit at 8 years old.
Yeah.
And going, okay, we're all in. And so to kind of
Millsaps, you're training, you're getting in the industry some, you're getting your name out there.
So I kind of did the whole Winter Am series, and it was a success. I was basically winning or getting second or thirds, on the podium every weekend riding with Davey. Just kind of elevated me, and it boosted my confidence riding with those guys. And as we were going through it, I was either in the championship points lead or in second. And if I remember correctly, showing up at the last round, we actually drove to the last round because it was the last one final. My dad's like, you can take the week off of school. Rad got down there and ended up getting bronchitis and couldn't race. So I lost the championship, and it was kind of like pretty demoralizing because I wasn't.
Where was it?
Gainesville, Florida.
Yeah, Gatorback?
Gatorback, exactly. Yeah. When it was a sick track with the elevator and everything.
Yeah.
And I remember so vividly because the weather was very foggy and it wasn't a very nice day. And
the Winter Series is when everybody comes.
Exactly.
They flock down there.
They flock.
I remember it was like Thanksgiving was huge,
yeah,
right? That started
huge. Well, that was Winter Olympics. So that was different than Winter Ams.
Yeah. Winter Ams is, I remember Barry Carson. This was years ago.
Yeah.
They would bring their hauler down and stay down there 6-8 weeks or whatever and race that series from New Jersey.
Exactly.
Correct?
Okay. Correct. Exactly. And you had people from Texas, everywhere. Winter Ams was one of the biggest series in the United States at that time.
Ocala,
Gainesville, Reddick.
Yep.
You have Okeechobee,
yep.
All the tracks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure what still exists. Bithlo in Orlando.
Yeah.
So we had them all and just bitching tracks, right? Rough, just man's tracks. They were never groomed or anything like that. And
how old were you when you were there?
Between 10 and 12,
10 and 12,
and I lived, on and off with Davey and Colleen and Brian, and we just kind of fed off of each other. They would take me to races, and a long time, Colleen was my legal guardian for a very long time.
Yeah.
And so, I lived, people ask, where'd you grow up? I'm born and raised in Washington, D.C., from Annapolis, Maryland, but I was on the road.
Yeah.
I was living on the road
gypsies,
my entire life.
I mean, they're gypsies. Their lifestyle is something. Yeah,
it's
okay.
foreign.
So I stay on this. We're a pro athlete. We're a motocrosser. You're making the progressions. You're a mini sensation. 7, 8 years old. We talked about that in the kitchen last night. You signed with Fox Apparel at 8 years old, and we're around all these guys. We could get into that later.
Yeah.
Take me on your journey. So now You're gaining sponsorships.
Yeah, so pretty much from the Winter AMs really kind of solidified my role within that class of the 65 or the 60 class back then, because it was before 65s even came out. And I'm really dating myself right now.
I love it.
But that being said, it just kind of elevated me. And when I was around Davey and Brian, and I also was around Jimmy Keys a lot as well. And he was one of those names too that was kind of coming up, sponsors, AXO, Team Green. And you kind of strive to have those Fox or AXO and Team Green rides at that time because it was so illustrious. I mean, you had Nick Ways, the Carmichaels, the James Stewarts, they were all on that program, and you kind of always wanted to emulate them, right?
Right.
And so I always strive for that. So as I kind of grew, and started racing bigger races, in 1998 was kind of like, I would call it my coming out party. 98 I was 11 years old at Loretta Lynn's, and
and Loretta Lynn's is we talked about. Yeah. Remember, we had Daniel Patulli at the house. And
okay.
These guys don't know anything.
So yeah, Loretta Lynn's is the biggest amateur national in the world.
Where is it?
It's in Hurricane Mills, Tennessee,
on the other side of Nashville.
Yeah, so
it's on her dude ranch. It's really cool. I think they started in 1982.
Yeah, it's been around. I won't even say longer than that. Maybe
we'll find that.
Yeah,
out.
we have to find out the exact. I should know this type of stuff, but forgive me.
I think it was like right there.
Yeah, it's been around forever. So it's the most prestigious race, and still to this day, the most prestigious amateur national in the entire world. And I don't mean that. It is in the world. There's nothing like it. Obviously, you have juniors, worlds in Europe and stuff like that. No discredit to them; they do their thing. But a lot of people come to Loretta Lynn's to kind of prove their stake.
Right.
And so 98, I remember perfectly because it was the first time I ever won a moto at Loretta's, and to win just a race, just one race there is in my opinion, huge. It's massive. And unfortunately it wasn't an overall for me, but I went 2, DNF 1. So you can kind of put that together, and I should have been in the championship mix.
Right.
And, I showed up the last moto with nothing to lose, and I finally won. And there's a picture somewhere out there of me just bawling in tears because I just an emotional mess. And after I won that, things changed dramatically. The Fox things kind of were bigger. The Fox deal was better. More invites to certain races kind of came along. Team Green Kawasaki was more of a full-time gig rather than just like a little support gig. Moving up to 85s after that, on a bigger bike was a big thing. So I went basically full Kawasaki after that, moved into the 80, 85 class, and kind of just rode that out. I didn't really have...
Are you in school at this point?
No, I'm home. I'm out. I'm homeschooled. Yeah. I'm full homeschooled by now. Yeah.
And homeschooled to these guys. I remember Mills or Evennou saying it's no school. It's crazy.
But hey, I have to jump in there because my mother was beyond strict about, hey, you need your education. You cannot become what a lot of people became at my generation,
You were different than all the motocrossers I had. You could just tell. I was like, okay, he's a different level of still education, whatever. Almost, Griff, you'll know this. Ben, you'll know this. Almost to a detriment.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I was like, he's going to do bigger things. I see it every day with people like trying to play professional football. I'm like, you're going. That's not where you're going to be wired. And I saw that with you. I mean, on top of, all the gifts you had.
Yeah. And I think to your point, again, it's hard to say what you were really thinking back when you were 12, right?
But you were still well-spoken, and that was, parents, and you were put together. Even watching you last night talk, I was like, oh yeah, no wonder he's going to climb the charts in life and do what he wants to do. And all right, so you're 12. We got to get build up to when.
Okay, so
you met me.
So yeah, so that's what I'm actually going to get there right now. So essentially, my 80 career when I was on Kawasaki,
I never saw you on the Kawasaki.
Yeah, and for good reasons, because it wasn't. I just kind of floated, right? Like, let's just call it floating. Thirds, seconds, fourths, fifths, kind of a nationals there, always kind of there in the mix, but never really won anything. And again, like I said, a couple podiums at Loretta's in those classes, and then we just kind of Kawasaki was growing, and they were at the time paying less attention to their top athletes, which maybe I wasn't one of their top guys at the time, and that's totally fine with me saying it now.
Who were the top guys around there?
At that era, it was, like I said, James Stewart's, the Carmichaels. Ricky was still kind of amateur at that time, which is crazy to think because now he's, so far retired. But, you still had these guys, the Nick Ways, the Matt Walkers, the Aaron Lindsays, the Brett Racines. There were so many guys. Still, the coolest thing is, I still in communication with a lot of these guys. The list was huge on the Kawasaki program. So as these more talents came up, our budgets obviously got kind of pushed back, and we just didn't feel the attention from Cowie that maybe I thought I deserved, maybe my dad thought we deserved. So we made a big decision and we went to France and raced in Europe. Like, we just said, you know what? We don't care. We're just going to go overseas and race a little bit and see what that takes us.
And what's your connection with France?
My father. So my father is full French. Jean-Louis. And opened up his Cafe Normandy restaurant in Annapolis, Maryland.
Amazing.
1986, the year I was born, which supported my entire racing career, you know? And between him and my mom, you know, they sacrificed everything for me. Everything. Like, literally everything. So, that was my connection to France. And so we picked up and we said, you know, we're not going to take this Kawasaki deal. We're going to go race in Europe for a few months and just kind of for experience and see what that, and really at the time, I didn't really know that was the plan, you know.
How old are you?
13, 14. So we're getting really closer to meeting you. And that being said, you know, I went over terrified. My French was very shoddy. What were you
racing? What bikes?
We didn't know when we went over there. We were supposed to have a Kawasaki, ended up getting there, and I had a Yamaha, and I had a super mini Yamaha. Everything was big wheel over there at the time, which was really foreign to me because I was you remember when you met me, I was tiny, and I was even smaller back then. So I had to race a big wheel, and I showed up on a Yamaha.
What's a big wheel?
It's essentially an 85 with bigger wheelbase and usually a super mini motor, so it's a 105 motor inside of it. And it was kind of still new here in the States, but in Europe, in the French series, that's what they raced. And the guys were a lot bigger than me, a lot older than me too. I was younger one. They were 15, 16. And so, you know, went over there with no notion, no really understanding of doing, had a kind of a guide and a mechanic that understood the series and what to do. So went to my dad's hometown in Ben, which is just a little town outside of Paris. I want to say population's no more than 200-300 people. And, just kind of tried to adapt to the culture and go racing. Dude, got dusted my first race. Like, retarded, excuse my language on that, but oh my gosh, like fast, but just a different type of fast, like starting in first gear as opposed to starting in second gear. Like, everything was just foreign to me, no pun intended. But like everything was just different. The way we ate, our programs, you know, everything was timed practice. It wasn't go out and, you know, do your practice, then line up for your gate. You had to do time for your gate position and all this stuff. It was really kind of what it is now almost. And, I just didn't do good. And so we ended up finding a couple fast French kids while we were at that first national and, linked up with them and started kind of riding with them, getting to know the culture a little bit. And I felt more comfortable, and then finally started making friends. My French got better as we kind of progressed. And then my dad kind of said to me, he goes, I got to get back to the States because I got to take care of the restaurant. So he just left me in France at 13, 14 years old. With a mechanic who I didn't really know that well. So to kind of look back at it now and even speak about it is wild. But yeah, so I was living in France and kind of bouncing back from my aunt's house who lived in Lyon and Marseille, and bouncing from France to Belgium. I raced in Belgium. I raced in Holland. And, you know, I did good. I think I won a Supercross in Belgium. I won a Supercross there. And then at that time, it was kind of time to come home, right? Like, things were kind of kicking off back home, and the racing was getting back going, the series and everything. We kind of needed to jump back into it if I was going to continue this journey that we call motocross. And so that's when we decided to go buy some Yamahas, because I felt good on it in France. Like, I was getting adapted to it, and I was just riding Yamaha back there. So we terminated our deal with Kawasaki, and we bought Yamahas. And I think within the first, month or two, I showed up to the first national in Texas at GNC's on Yamaha's, full privateer. We were paying everything out of pocket. And I did really well. I think I got, a couple seconds and thirds at the nationals there. And luckily Yamaha saw that and gave me a little bit of support to kind of continue the year on. And then that following year, when I turned 14 to 15 in the super mini classes, I had full Yamaha support, BSY Yamaha out of Cocoa Beach, Florida. You remember that, I think. And so, things progressed. And then by that point, I had a lot of confidence. I had a lot of experience. I had world experience, so people didn't have. And my confidence was definitely good. And I knew that I was the guy in that class in the 14 to 15.
Were you the name?
Yeah, in that big class, because everybody like Davey and all those guys were still younger than me. So they were in the little bike class. But once I moved up against the Jason Lawrences, the Adam Chatfields, the Matt Gerkeys, all those, it was kind of us, Josh Grant, all these names, we were kind of all in the same class at the time. So it was still a big class, but it was, kind of us as the big heads in that class. So there was expectations, you're going to win, and Yamaha expected that from me. unfortunately, I'm a mental case, or was a mental case, still am. But, I just didn't have, and you'll know this better than anybody because you worked with me. I just didn't have the confidence. I knew the ability was there, but the confidence didn't match the ability. And it was always a question when I go to the line, what am I doing the right things? Did I train hard enough? Who's here? Why is this guy next to me? Why is he lining up? Is he playing games in my head? And I questioned everything, right? And I think that's kind of ruined my year in 2000, let's say 2002, 2001, which is the year we met. And so,
did your pops buy that big hauler?
Yeah.
Boy, I love that thing.
Yeah. So,
big, rig. I mean, it was. Yeah.
We've gone through rigs like underwear. It seems like, and everybody who either listens to this or knows me can attest to that. Like, we'd show up at a race every weekend with a new rig, whether it be a fun mover or toy hauler or something like that. It was just wild. And I, can't comprehend. He bought a semi. Well, that's where you met me. We were in a semi, essentially. The toter or the fun hauler with the fifth wheel trailer that was like 45 feet long.
Yeah.
Beyond me, putting a car inside of it, a geo tracker and a motor and a golf cart and 6 bikes in there.
Yeah.
And going racing.
Yeah. So, I remember that.
And a full kitchen too in the front of it so he could cook for the entire Yamaha staff.
He did.
Every Mini-O's. Every Mini-O's, every Loretta's, he'd cook dinners.
His father was so hardworking, guys. It was amazing because he had that restaurant 7 days a week. And I think that's where Jean-Louis and I connected is we had a business that didn't run unless we were in it. And he was that guy too, but he would do everything for him. And he also had a French temper too after races that was, part of it.
Yeah.
It was part of the beat down or insecure. We could go on and on with that. So, all right. So where are we? How are we?
2001, 2002, kind of just coming up on when you and I met. So essentially, I went through all my Yamaha stuff and then I had to make the big leap from 85 to 125s, which is the biggest leap, I think, in your career.
You were still racing 85s with me.
When we met, when we met. So we can kind of go backwards then before that, because I had just basically finished my 80 career when you and I met. Like, I was towards the right at the end of it, I think, when we met.
Yeah.
Because I jumped on big bikes, which that was the main reason you and I got together, because I was such a wet noodle. I needed strength to ride a big bike.
I mean, I was with Ryan Mills, and we'll talk about that, but after Ryan raced, the 85s were the up-and-coming guys that were going to be on the 125s, and then the 125s were the guys that are going to be on the 250s, and after that, you made it, and 125 still raced nationals also, and big time, but he was that 85 guy that was just super, super fast, and had, if you know motocross style or technique, he was beautiful on a bike. I mean, much prettier, whatever that means, but then like a Ryan Mills or a Sipes or... I would say the two guys that I had, Ben Riddle and Evennou, had like the biggest flow on a bike, in my opinion. But he was still so flowy, like he was fast on this 85. And he went back to Mills in the pits and was like, "Man, that kid's fast." He's like, "Oh yeah, Evennou, yeah, I know him," or whatever. Da 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 da.
Yeah, we were parked next to each other at Muddy Creek.
We were,
and we literally, because we knew Ryan, right? Like,
did you guys park next to him because you saw him there? Did we come park?
I don't know, but I do know that we knew Ryan quite well before that. We'd race Englishtown, we'd race Binghamton, Unadilla, all that stuff together. Up north. So
these are big tracks, big competition, rough, big, gnarly tracks. That
national tracks.
Yeah. But he was like Ryan Mills. I just remember when Ryan came down and we had to go to a race. I think it was a Mega Series race up in Bluntville, Tennessee. And I was like, when Ryan pulled in with his mechanic and we pulled in with him and we're starting to set up training or whatever, everybody was flocking going, Ryan Mills is here.
Yeah, he was the next thing.
I don't know if Bubba was at that race or I know like a Matt Walker was and then Ryan pulled away from him, but he was that local pro guy forever. Right. So you were like, Nicky was like Ryan Mills because Nicky was the 85 guy and Mills was the 125 Honda guy. But I can't remember how we got connected. So, was it between motos or something?
Yeah, I honestly think it was my dad and you got connected because you were in gear. And again, this is very shoddy probably, but I remember you being in gear and saying something like, "I got arm pump so bad," and my dad gave you something for your arm pump because I used to get arm pump quite bad, or some cream or something like that. It's just weird, and you two started talking, and then the rest is history.
Right, because I race like Brian White and Mills are like, "Dude, get a bike. Yeah. You got the money, go get it." So I went to Topside Road and bought a KX 250. I think at that level, I think maybe $3,200 or $4,200
max. Yeah, and that was pricey at the time.
Pricey, and I'm like, all right, I haven't raced in 30 years since I was 14, 15, and my racing is different than his racing. I mean, he's a level of levels. And I do remember that. I entered like, and Mills
Beginner
said,
class.
you don't enter the 250D class, you'll get killed. It's the worst class. And the pros like Nikki and the guys, between their races, they'd go watch the D class because it was so fun to watch because everybody was like,
just a yard sale,
full, and no style. You were just
yard sale,
full
it was
yard
dangerous.
I was like, why am I in the, like, it was spooky for me, but the arm pump and the training, I'm like, man, I was doing all the training and it didn't convert over to this at all because it was like a whole different.
Yeah.
And that's when I started studying the energy systems of alactate and anaerobic and aerobic, and mountain bike is anaerobic, and road cycling, and that's when we got into it.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so how did we get there? So I started talking to you.
So my
think
father,
your dad came over.
He did.
He talked to Mills,
Yep.
I think, first, and it's like, what are you doing from Clintondale, New York to Muddy Creek?
Yeah.
He's like, oh, I'm here with my trainer. I just started working with him. And that's because your dad was always looking.
He was
for
looking
the
for the
next
next
edge.
thing because
Yep.
we never had a program, right? It was just go ride dirt bikes, go for a run, go your cycling, and do that, right? Like there was no structure at all.
Yeah.
And so we were looking for something, and you guys connected, and instead of going back to Maryland, we came back to Knoxville.
That's how
after
it
that
went
race.
down.
We literally didn't go back to Maryland. We came straight here after that, and I don't even remember we parked the rig somewhere. Remember we had to find parking for that semi because we were in the semi.
And we parked it at Homberg.
Yeah, exactly.
Your dad slept there.
Exactly, yeah. And I think
you
I
guys
trained,
slept there. Maybe you slept with me. But
yeah,
he
in the
slept
back,
there.
behind it.
Yep.
Holy.
Yep. Homberg place. I'll take you to it.
Yeah. Because I remember Bogarts and I remember the gym, and I remember going in the gym going, this is what we're doing. Like this is where I'm going to get to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. So we came back. I think we trained for like a week, right? Or something like that, just to test it or something like that.
Did your dad stay?
I think he stayed
the
because
whole time.
you let me borrow a road bike and we went road biking on the
road
boulevard.
biking. He was always road biking or running. The guy never sat still.
Yeah, no.
Helped Bogarts cook.
Exactly. Yeah. We ate at Bogarts at night too. And
your dad cooked for us a couple times at the house because he was amazing. And I still remember this, and I don't want to interrupt you. Stay with your flow, but Griff, you'll know this better than anything of you doing this documentary with us, is when John Louis was in town and he would cook, I couldn't wait to eat, but I'd always ask, what are we eating tonight? And I say this over and over again, and it's true. Shawl, I got to see what the grocery store gives me, and I'll make it once I see what's there. And I was like,
how beautiful is that?
Holy shit, that's exactly how I make my programs, is when somebody walks in, everybody's like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know. I got to see this guy move his body, and then I'll make something. I thought the correlation was spot on.
So beautiful.
I mean,
like
it's
to say
really
that,
beautiful.
It is. It's beautiful when you think about it. Like nobody takes the time to do that anymore. Like to understand it. So,
I know it.
Yeah,
okay, go
cool.
ahead.
I would have never remembered that. That's pretty cool. That like gives me a little bit of goosebumps. Like hearing my dad say
it's
that.
the coolest thing ever because it's like people ask, what am I doing tomorrow? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, well, other trainers write like a 6-week program. I won't do that.
Right.
Like, and people offer tons and tons of money for me to write. I had one athlete wanted me to write a 3-month program, and money's no object. And I was like, well, I don't know that. First of all, you're not going to be with me. You're purchasing a program and going somewhere. How do I know your technique? How do I know what you're doing? How do I know your recovery? So it never worked.
Right.
It was like, oh, this guy's turning down tons of money to not write these programs.
Right.
I'm like, I got to see what they're doing. And when your father did that, I was like, Radomir was right. You got to watch the athlete. You got to feel the athlete. And Radomir was one of my strength coaches, my mentors from Yugoslavia that I lived with. And your father was the same way, but overseas. It's totally crazy.
Yeah, it was wild. So essentially going back to the story is we did that week of training, and I think we were all happy, right? Like we understood that there was something here to be had.
Millie was with us, right? Or was it you?
I thought it was just me. I think
he might have went home.
He might have gone home after that.
Because he was already probably with me.
Yeah, he was already on the program. I think he had to go back for racing, or I remember being by myself there that time. I think because I was up in the training on the bicycle up top at the gym, and then coming back
in the loft.
Yeah, in the loft space.
Yeah.
I was up there a lot
on the Tetrix bike. That's still here. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, which is wild that I'm remembering all this stuff. Like, there's a lot of memories coming back from.
We were in the kitchen last night, and I'm battling another neck injury now from a head episode, and we were comparing. Like, I don't remember this, and then he'll get into his bike crash where like he lost his memory, but then he brought up things that I was like, wow, because it needs to be jolted. You think 33 years of doing the business, 33.
Yeah,
I mean that's a long time of doing a business, and then having all the things that go through the business and your personal life and business life. You forget life. You forget segments, like blocks of years. And then you have these people come through like Nikki and tell you these things. And it's like, I mean, it brings tears in my eyes just talking about it, going, I pioneered training athletes at that level of like, okay, you're going to live with me. You're going to, and you're going to walk. And I did.
Absolutely.
And it started, and I tried to find him, and I started with Aaron Dieter, because I had to take somebody that wasn't him, because he's a beautiful soul. But when I met him, he was a spoiled, entitled punk, and he got in his own way, because he had some of the, even Mills would go, he's much more talented than I am. But I didn't even talk to him a lot. I actually talked to his father, because he was just he was a punk. He wasn't that guy yet.
No,
Does that
absolutely.
make sense?
1,000%. Yeah. I mean,
but in fair, when you're getting at 7 or 8, you're getting that. You're getting sponsorships. You're getting paid from, you get that whole fluff
all the time. The time. Your ego is just being boasted literally on an hourly basis when you're at the track, saying, "Oh, hey, and then like he said, I heard you talking to my oldest, Ashlyn was here, and maybe it was Griff and Ben, that it wasn't just a motocross guy in a motocross place. You just jumped in. You were like, where in the hell am I? And I'm training with all these different athletes, and I'm not something special in here because nobody's special. We're just getting it. Yeah, it is. Yeah, and absolutely. It was the concept, and it was a big reason why I think it worked for me here, right? Is because you could walk into this gym and you could just understand and breathe in the atmosphere that everyone here was for the same goal, right? We were here just to be better, just to get better. As simple as that. And
that's gone.
Yeah, and I think, again, like you just said, that's kind of really, it's hard to find nowadays. But back then, it was different because our sport of motocross didn't have that structure. It didn't have that real understanding of what do I need to do to get better. And Ricky, obviously, just a few years later, Ricky kind of turned the table on how we approach motocross. He went all in with Alden and did that whole program and then just started dominating people. And you're just like, okay, we got to take this stuff seriously now. Motocross is real. It's life or death. And, I can attest to it. I've had multiple friends pass away from racing motocross, whether it be from heat exhaustion or whether it be from a bad crash and a broken neck. It's not the sport that's for the faint of heart at the end of the day. So you have to take it seriously. And when Ricky did, I think a lot of people kind of were like, shit, like I got to work harder now and I got to do this. And a lot of people kind of fell off the map. Maybe me being one of those included, kind of just were like, I don't really want to do this. But to your point about being 8 years old and being, sponsored and having all this stuff, being in magazines, being on covers of magazines, you get so jaded. You get so lost in the sauce and you get to that point where it's time to turn pro, but you're already burnt. You're burnt by the time you're 16. You're like, okay, it's time to like take the next step. But you're going, dude, I've been doing this for 10 years already. 10 years at 16, I've been at this and I'm smoked. And that's like looking back now at 36. That's how I feel about it. That's what I kind of look back. I go, I was burnt out before I even really, got into the real swing of things, the professional stuff, because I remember like it was yesterday going to my my last professional race, which would have been my third professional race at Glen Helen, and my dad and I sitting down for dinner and him looking at me and going, if you don't perform and you don't have a ride by the end of the day tomorrow, I can't do it. I can't afford to pay for your racing anymore. And, I was getting ready to turn 18 and for all reasons are right. Every father should have to go, hey, listen, you gotta pick up your shit and you got to go at 18 years old. It's time to go. Giddy up. And, I think that really hit me because obviously I had the best race of my life that next day. And finally I was able to put things behind me and secure a ride for the next year. You will get into that stuff, down the road. Mm-hmm. But, to your point about training and going through all these overwhelming situations, it's a lot at such a young age and try to comprehend what you're doing from being a punk kid at 14, to growing with you. And I think just being with you for those few years that we worked together opened up my eyes to realize that, okay, it's not just motocross, there's more to this. There's life, in between motocross and that. And my confidence was also at an all-time high when I was training with you because I was training with elite athletes that I had seen in magazines or I'd seen on TV. I'm like, oh, I trained Todd Helton or I trained Chad Pennington sick. Like I trained with those guys. And at that time, it gave me a different type of confidence that I was able to go into a race and go, these guys aren't training with these guys. I am. And I can go out there and I can win and dominate. And I think in 2003 when we were on our full blown program, and I had stepped up to the 125s, and I was living in Florida, and you and I were communicating regularly, and you were kind of structuring out a program for me to kind of go. I remember being really diligent with RJ. You remember RJ Horrocks is my mechanic at the time.
Yeah.
Still love the dude, still talk to the dude. And he was a big tool in my 2003 campaign, you know, when we trained with you and in Florida and making sure I was still on your program. He was the one who was going, hey, you need to stick to Charles's program. You need to giddy up and go. And, you know, we showed up to that first race at Texas with real no intentions of understanding what we were going to get out of it, right? My first 125 race. And I show up and I get second, you know, against every freaking fast Josh Grant, Matt Gerke, Davey Millsaps, Cody Dickey, like I'm going to date myself with some of these names, Jake Weimer, all these guys were there, and they had been riding big bikes for a year or two, you know, before me. And I jumped in right there with them, and I was fast, if not faster than them. And I'm like, okay. Like, you got this, right? And that really helps you at a young age, you know, at a 16-year-old age, 15 years old, you're going, mentally, I'm good. Like I'm in this, right? And so 2003 was kind of an up and down year. But then when I came here before Loretta's, everything changed. When me and Mills came here for our, like 6 weeks, I think, before Loretta's, we just trained after our regionals. We stayed with you. We lived with you. We did everything with you. And knowing that Ryan was, you know, going to be probably AMA Horizon Award winner and a pro class winner that year, and riding with him every single day at the track and understanding where our times were and where he was on the track and where I was on the track and going, all right, like I got this, right?
We had a track. We were talking about this last night. Stay with that. Stay with your thoughts. But we were talking about this last night. I found a track off Watt Road on the other side of the fireworks store, and I happened to train the family here in town called the Brownlees. I trained all the kids, and he owned that property, and I needed to get on that track. So I think Brownlee opened it up for us and told the guy that ran it that we could use it any time, because they needed that was such a crucial part of my business years, because you had to format everything. You didn't have a track like a high school track to run laps around. You had to find, if these guys were going to stay with you for 6 weeks, they had to ride tracks. And I'm a one-man show. It's not a Millsaps training center in Florida and Texas and wherever everybody has them with everything there. I have to go find everything. So I had to find a track. We went to Friendsville. I remember going to Friendsville. Gatlinburg up in Pigeon Forge. Yeah, we found what we had to for him to ride, because it was crucial. I took care of the training, the housing. You lived with me. We ate everything. But that was such a huge part of it.
Yeah, it was so primitive at the time. If you really think about it, it was so now we think of it as primitive. Sorry, back then it was so ahead of its time. And like you said, we had to find tracks. Like we just had to call people and go, hey, do you have a track? Do you have a backyard track or whatever? And everybody kind of welcomed us with open arms.
Well, because you guys were like, I still remember going to Topside. Charlie, who owns the Topside Kawasaki place, he was like, Nick Evennou and Ryan Mills are in Knoxville. Why? And I'm like, they're training with me. They're like, what? And then we found a track in Halls in North Knoxville, and Stooksbury was a kid's name. He was a B rider. And he had a track, and they were like, "Oh,
crazy track!"
Yeah, do you remember that? It was on
track,
their
jumps everywhere.
Do you remember that?
Oh, like it was yesterday. I was scared to do some of the jumps there. They were huge.
So what I did, Griff, and you'll be like, "He's the art of the hustle. He's Charlie Hustle." So they were my Heltons and Penningtons. So all the local guys, Blaylock. Construction. You see Blaylock Construction? Scott Blaylock, the son of Blaylock Construction. You'll see every dump truck, everything in Pigeon Forge built from him. When they got wind, they were finding me, and I was going, oh, come train. So I got all the local guys that I didn't know local guys were around here that wanted to train, because these guys were in town training. So then they stayed and trained because they were local. They would show up like you would show up Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or whatever. But Blaylock, I remember he had deep pockets. He was like, I'll train whatever it is.
Yeah,
and
I remember well.
Stooksbury had deep pockets. And that was a weird, it was so surreal. These times are so surreal, Griff, because I had to carve my niche in something when I was already doing something at a high level with the baseball, with the football. I could have easily stayed there. And, you know, people that were in my corner always said, and I think I had shirts that say it on the, my eyes could see what you can't see. And that's one thing something happened, you know, Harrison Smith, you get him in 8th grade, and I'm like, he's going to be pro. Chad Pennington at 15, I wrote him a letter and said, you're going to be a candidate for the Heisman Trophy Award at this. You're going to be the first quarterback taken in the year 2000. And that was 7 years before. And he had the envelope when he opened it up and cried like babies with that one, cried like babies with it's the same stuff. It's the same thing that you see. And this kid, I mean, honestly, if at 14 years of age in motocross is like getting a professional athlete at 29 in football. It's almost not too late, but late, where if I had him at 7 or 8,
yeah,
he would have been 5-time, 10-time national champion. And because I would have had his headset, I would have had his mind right. All right, go.
And to your point, that's what we'll get into.
Wow. I mean, we could go on and on. I learned so much. It was like a university, guys. I learned so much with the motocross industry. I mean, I could go for 2 hours with this. We were chopping it up so much. I don't know if you guys understand, because Griff, he's going to tell you so much in the documentary and the interview you're doing next, but you had all these different things, and I was really starting to peak in the business of huge, because Helton just went off. You know, Helton goes, okay, my college roommate brought me Helton and we were all in, and I was making promises that I had no clue and how he was going to do those. It's an all for me. It's euphoric. It's Jesus-like as we talk. I told him things that I couldn't back up. I was like, you're going to be the first. What are your goals? He goes, well, I've been in the league for 2 years in the MLB or a year or whatever. I think he was making $2.1 million for the year. And I go, what are your goals? He goes, well, I want to make my first All-Star game and I want to just blow up and basically have a bigger contract. I'm like, guaranteed I could do both those for you. He's like, all right, so how much is it? 3 months, 4 months? And he wrote me a check that day for $6,000, and I kept it in the binder forever because I wanted to make sure he was happy. If he wasn't happy, take it back. And he did it all. Like, he blew up that year, made the All-Star game, and signed a $152 million contract. Griff probably knows more because I've been so deep with this cat for the last 2 years. I can't understand that stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't understand how you see that. And with the motocross thing, I think even when I was talking yesterday to some people, they're like, man, when you light up when you talk about that. And I was like, well, you light up because even my past history of motocross, it made football and everything else of taking the hardest hits ever. And this cat's one of the best football cats around in high school. And I trained his father. He was Keith DeLong.
Yeah, we had that conversation last night. Yeah.
You have that. When you race motocross, you could almost do anything again, because when you hit the ground doesn't move, bodies do. And that was the biggest thing. So, when I was racing motocross, I was still doing, because I could never be that level, but I still wrestled hockey, football, baseball, and they were so easy compared to that sport. And that the one-on-one, and me and Mr. Haslam, Big Jim Haslam, we talked about that on air, about team sports to one-on-one. And I think I was so privileged to do both. And I think both are unison in work. But when you talk about one-on-one sports, I don't think there's anything like motocross, in my opinion. And it could be the love, but it also could be, Griff and Ben and Nikki, and you know this, man, it's a family sport. And it's a beautiful thing, because you really do see, especially the sisters, they go with the weekends, they sit there with your sisters. It's the same thing. And it was the best times with my dad. We had, Nikki, when you guys were fighting, it reminded me of my dad and I fighting, because I'd be like, well, what happened there? What happened? And you're Italians, French, whatever. You're fighting, you love, you pack everything up. It taught a lot of discipline. And that's the thing I think, Nikki, it was different for Nikki. And I'm really breaking you down human behavior wise. I had to do it all, Griff, because my father was a bartender. So Friday nights he was still working. So I had to have the van packed, the bikes on there. And remember, I'm just an amateur. And up north, it was amateur expert. It wasn't all the classes they had down south. Yeah. It was a real separator. And it was so big up north, and nobody knows that, Nikki. You had to have qualifiers before you raced your moto. And it was so hard for me to get. Sometimes I just did the qualifier and didn't make the motos, and that was my day. And I watched some of the pro guys like Barry Carson, right, Robbie Hayes, and the guys, Carlo Cone, and some of the guys that I knew or looked up to. But the discipline, the self-discipline that you had to do back then. For me, my father was a former Marine, and he's like, I'm not doing this shit for you. You do it. I'm working. That was the difference maker. That's the difference maker. That's, if I had him, I would have treated him the same way. But you watch all these kids, the dads put the bikes up on the stools, they muddy them off, they sit there, they pout or get mad because of the right or wrong.
Right.
I'm watching it. But if this son of a bitch had to pack his stuff up and do this, and you got to understand, he was labeled like the rich kid because he pulled up in this hauler. Like he said, Mills is like, oh yeah, because Mills didn't have it. Yeah. Gary Mills had to, sell the house. They have to second mortgage the house, third mortgage the house for these kids to race, right or wrong.
Absolutely.
I mean,
right.
I'm going long-winded.
No, you're right.
I apologize, but what you had to do as a responsible man, we talked about this. It's like David and Goliath in the Bible. Why am I doing all this? And now you find out why. Because I'm self-sufficient. I'm sitting there talking while I'm folding towels and training people, and I'm responsible for the trash. I'm responsible. You had to build those responsibilities.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, you're right. And motocross is like you said, all those things: family sport, teaching responsibilities, and life lessons and stuff like that. But again, I was always touted as, quote unquote, the rich kid with all these different types of rigs and 15 bikes and all that stuff. Yeah, I absolutely was. And
I had to put up with him, Griff. This wasn't the man that I worked with. I had to have, and the Lord bless me, and anybody that's around me that's with me is like, you have the best patience in the world. And I think it was from being raised by my grandmother a lot and being there and around older people and just sitting there. My father would always say when he'd take me around his friends, just sit, don't talk. And you just listened, and it made me, I think, a good podcast host also. Of just, you get into things. So we are,
Ryan Mills,
we're training. You're 125.
Getting ready
we go to
Loretta's.
Loretta Lynn's.
Yeah, we go to Loretta Lynn's. So yeah, we'll pick back up with that. Ryan and I spent 6 months together training with you, 4 to 6 months training, doing everything with you. And yeah, we went to Loretta's. Obviously, he was Honda Factory Connection at the time. I was on Yamaha's at the time. And there was and mind you, a lot of people don't know this, but I barely qualified for Loretta Lynn's that year. I had just mental malfunctions. I actually went to the 125B stock as an alternate that year. It's wild. Yeah, just completely shit the bed at the regionals. Just mental, just whatever. And so I went in 125B modified and 125B stock were my 2 classes Loretta Lynn's 2003. Came here, we trained our asses off. We went all in. We put all our chips into that bag, and we're going to go Loretta's, and we're going to see what happens. And there was no anticipation. Okay, hey, you're going to win titles, right? It's like, let's see what we get out of this. And I think that was almost the best way to go in, is kind of just with no expectation and just having the program that we had and letting it flourish and letting everybody, see what I was doing, because everybody didn't know what I was doing except for you and Mills. Mm-hmm. And there was no social media at this time, right? We had flip phones, and I don't even know if we had flip phones, right? 2003, yeah, we had flip phones.
I think you text by numbers, the keyboard,
exactly, T9 word,
yeah.
So wild. So anyways, we show up to Loretta's, we get a Yamaha deal, and we're kind of doing our thing. We had a fun mover this time, got rid of the toy hauler and all that crap and all the big stuff, because we were on 125, so less bikes were needed and stuff like that. So, we got there, everything was prepped and going, and, got our practices out of the way. But I was on a program. It was very almost religiously structured at Loretta's in 2003. And I, I'll attribute that to the training that you and I did, was because I got up in the mornings, went for my jog in the morning, came back, took a rest, about a 10-15 minute lay down rest with my headphones on. I had my motivational speaker head, whatever was in there. It was called Race Mind or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it was just kind of like, you're great, you're this, all the fluffy stuff that I needed at a 16-year-old, age, and to kind of reap my head away from the negative, saying, okay, this guy's here. And as crazy as I think, I showed up at the first race in the 125B modified. I think I, got a 3rd or 4th place start, worked my way into the lead and started to check out. And about halfway through the race, my back wheel fell off in the mechanics area right in front of my father. Mm-hmm. And so he forgot to tighten the axle. So my whole back wheel fell off right in the mechanics area. Like, okay, this is no lie. Like, if you were there in 2003, you know what I'm talking about. My back wheel fell off. So that starts my week, right? Like, that's not a really great confidence booster. And so, Loretta's is different. It's a different beast. You don't really.
It's 1 week.
It's 1 week of racing. Yeah. It's you start motos at 7 a.m. in the morning. You're always going to have one really muddy race because it rains once a week, which is crazy. It didn't this year.
In August, humidity.
Yeah.
It's
hot.
as hell.
Yeah. You're looking at 90 to 100%.
But you guys
humidity.
are ready because you were in
We
Tennessee,
did it. Yeah, we did it. We were right here.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we were here. We were used to it. It was nothing for us.
Right.
And so, I think my confidence was so high because I got in the lead. And that was easy. Like, I passed Josh Grant. I passed Kyle Chisholm, Jake Weimer, a lot of guys that should have been faster than me, I guess, on paper.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I came to the 125B stock with really almost no anticipation of anything, and got a decent start. And me and Josh Grant battled the whole race, and I got second in the first moto. I'm like, okay, cool. Maybe, we can set ourselves up for a championship in this class at least. I have a DNF and mod.
Mm-hmm.
So the next race was the mod race, and it was a mudder, just buried in mud. And I was last gate pit because I obviously DNF'd the first moto, so I was far on the outside, bad start. But I think I worked my way into like third or second. Bike blew up. Like, cool, another DNF in the mod class. Throw that one away. Showed up the second 125B mod, whole shot, checked out. I think I won by like 10 seconds. Like dominated though. And I remember like the race because I remember you'd hit the tabletop in the middle, you'd make a right hand, you'd hit the camelback, and you kind of go, and you could always judge who was there in second. And I could always see him kind of out of the corner of my eye. And it just, the gap kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I didn't see Gerke. I didn't see Josh Grant. I didn't see any of the guys like that were in the championship hunt. Really, they got bad starts, and I just did my thing. But my brain was just, there was nothing that could stop me. It was weird. And I get goosebumps talking about it because I wish I could go back to that and have that confidence. And at 36, I kind of slowly am trying to get there, but nothing can replace it. It's this moment where you're just in the flow and you're just like, everything is working perfectly. And even when I crossed the finish line, I didn't have like a big emotion, it wasn't like, oh yeah, I did it. It was kind of like, okay, you won your moto. Now you got to back that up and you got to win the next moto and win this championship and seal it off. Right. Like it was business. And so that really changed my entire mindset. So when I showed up for the last and final mod moto, I had 2 DNFs, right? There was nothing to lose. Let's just go out and have some fun. And even my dad didn't even want me to race it in case I got hurt for the stock championship, right? I said, no, we're going to race. We're going to have some fun. And another last gate pick, far outside, came out like 6th or 7th. But I just remember cutting my way through the pack so fast. I was like 10th, 9th, 6th, but first.
Because there's no expectation.
Yeah,
we talk about that. Griff and I talk so much, like, when I'm mountain biking in headphones, we're really processing so much with this documentary and talking about like the flows, like even you getting you to come down here. Griff's still young; he's still 26. He's only going to be 26, but his walk with Christ is amazing, and just who he is. He's his head and heart. He's the total package. Would still get antsy, patience. It'll come when it'll come, and then hey, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen,
right.
and that's what happens to athletes when they turn it off and there's no expectations. They become that flow state. They're actually trying harder without knowing they're trying harder. It's bizarre because there's nothing like you have when you say there's nothing to lose. There's nothing to lose.
Literally.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So we went into it with no expectations, bad start, but again, just carving my way through, but so easily, like passing dudes that maybe I shouldn't have been passing that easy, and champions now who like can look back and go, dude, I beat that guy, or kind of. So I got into the lead, and halfway through the race, my handlebars fall off. My entire top triple clamps just right off the middle tabletop. Pull my handlebars off. I'm looking down, and
what's a tabletop for the audience and the listeners?
Jump, straight transition, downside. So you have a double with a gap in the middle, triple with 2 gaps in the middle. Tabletop's just a flat tabletop.
But you don't touch the tabletop.
Yeah, you just jump over it.
You jump over it.
And
so
it was
they're like in the air, like 20, 30, 40 feet.
So I'm coming up to the tabletop, and I feel something's loose on the front end. Something's not right. And as soon as I go off of it, boom, bars fly off. I don't know how or what, but my reaction grabbed the forks to steer the bike off the track. I grabbed the front forks and steered the bike off the track. Did not crash, just came off. Handlebars were lying to the side. And I remember somebody came out to me and was looking at me going, what just happened? And I'm holding my handlebars. I'm looking at my dad in the mechanics area, and he throws the pit board down. He's, you know how it goes from there.
God, yeah.
So it's just kind of, I was laughing at that point, right? Like I actually was laughing, walking off the track, just hysterically like, okay, whatever. And trying to get my mind ready for the stock to win this championship. Right. And so that's kind of when things became very surreal for me. Like, holy crap, I'm going into this race. I'm a 2-1. So I have a pretty big points lead. Like I have a cushion. I can finish 4th and still win a title, but 4th is the minimum I can finish.
Right.
So that played into my head going to that final moto.
Are you putting the pressure on because now it's time to turn it to factory? Like after this, are you still an amateur? Were you still an amateur?
I'm still an amateur. Yeah, I'm still in the B class. So
okay.
I'm going into this because I've never at Loretta's been in a position to where I can wrap up a title. I never have, and this is what as children we work our whole lives for. We work for this moment at Loretta Lynn's. I'm sorry, but like every bit of everything I did was for this one moment.
Yeah.
And so
they have that stuff on YouTube. You can really see it. Like, I don't know if Griff has, I'm sure he's getting into it, but you could pull up Loretta Lynn's YouTube and it shows,
and there's behind the scenes. Red Bull has like a whole series on behind the scenes stuff now. They do like, it's completely different than when I was going, right? It was pretty raw. Like you had Verb Moto and those guys getting content, which I wish one day I can hope to find content of me racing because I don't even remember what I look like on a bike.
He could pull it up for you. We'll find it.
But that being said, so I went into that final moto with just a lot of like, even going for that jog the morning of my race, everything was different, right? I'm like, and again, as I'm traveling and I'm going for a jog, a lot of people were like, they knew what was at stake, right? Good luck, Nick, today. Go get him, Nick. Yeah, Yamaha guys, go, 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 go. You're just like 16 years old. You're like, holy crap.
Mm-hmm.
And I got on the line, I got, second place start, and I knew Cale Wallace was gone in the lead. And I'm like, that's fine. Second championship. But then as the laps got closer to the end, the body started tightening up. The arm pump started coming in. I'm going, holy crap, I'm about to win a national title. What, again, I worked my entire life for, at 8, to make that decision at 8 years old was for this moment. And so, it just came around, and the guy who was in it for the championship was Cody Dickey. He cleaned me out what he had to do, right? He had to take me out in order to win it, and he did clean me out, and my clutch perch went up, and I'm like, I'm going to lose. Like, this is it. Somehow got back, remounted on the bike, and finished 4th. I went 2-1-4, and that was the last position I needed to win the title. I remember crossing the line, looking up at the scoreboard lady and going, did I win? Did I still win the championship? And she just gave me a thumbs up, and I just started tears I remember riding my bike on the podium, and my mom, there's pictures in Moto Playground of my mom and dad hugging me and crying. And it's just like, even now, like I think I might've cried even last night during sleep because I was thinking about it because I knew during this podcast this would come up.
Mm-hmm.
But you work at such a young age for this moment, and you finally achieve it. And it's surreal, right? Like everybody's there. And my whole life changed that day. And even from a sponsorship point of view, from a support point of view, from everything, like I didn't have the best of years in the beginning of the year. But since I won Loretta's, Yamaha was like, all right, we're going to renew you. We're going to sign you for, a couple years. We're going to make sure you're taken care of when you turn A class. And the next year, you're going to jump to 4 strokes. Everything is going to be different, right? No fear. My gear sponsor at the time came in like, hey, you're one of our elite guys now. I was getting paid by VMAR helmets and Oxstar boots at such a young age. I was making decent money as a 16-year-old kid with no notion of understanding what money was or the value of money, right? Like you just don't get it at that age. Maybe now more so because we live in a very different world. But then you just kind of like, okay, sick, let's buy a lifted truck. Let's just spend every dime that you have and be really dumb with it. Yeah. And so, we went down that avenue. But when I won Loretta's, like it was just flip the script, and I was like, all right, my confidence was through the roof. And the big deal was if you won the B class at Loretta's, you immediately moved into the A class after Loretta's. You didn't wait till the end of the year.
Got it.
Because it was in August, right? Mm-hmm. So you still had September, October, November, December to race B. But I was like, you know what? I'm not waiting. Like, let's go race A class. So we found Pro Sport. We found 4-stroke national races, in Danville, Virginia.
I remember that.
Birch Creek. And I remember going to Birch Creek, and I was like, I'm racing the A class here, and still had B backgrounds with yellow backgrounds. And I showed up, and I won. Like, I freaking won the pro class. I beat Kevin Walker, like, which was insane to do. Him and I battled with Jim Neese.
That's right.
And
I remember those guys.
Leaving with $2,500 cash.
Was Robbie Horton around?
I don't think Robbie was there, but like Paul Carpenter and Spud Webb were riding White Brothers 4-stroke Hondas, and they were in the 450 class, which I didn't race.
I remember all these guys because I had to do so much research. And then every name Kevin Walker was
Spud Walters.
Yeah, your legend. Yeah, Spud Walters was, but he was a 4-stroke.
Yeah, they were all 4-strokes, by Paulie, but that was the same series, right? So that was a big series. The 4-stroke series was a big deal, and it was a lot of cash money for the pro class. And so my dad and I were like, let's go hit these up and let's make some money. And we started going there. And then I think Englishtown was kind of like a coming out party for me as far as like my ability to ride with the big guys, right? Like
Kawasaki Race of Champions.
But I was on
New Jersey. I grew up at that track.
Yeah, K-Rock. Yeah, K-Rock was a big deal.
It's talk about surreal. It's just so surreal when you did that. But I didn't sit on my butt. I didn't go, oh, God's time, God's plan, I'll start training motocrossers. I had to do, as Griff says, his word, my due diligence.
You have to
get in there, cut, grind, or whatever, and come back with all these memories.
Yeah, and to have the respect in the sport too, right? Like, you're going to come in and people look like this sport is so cutthroat. It's just, conveyor belt of kids and conveyor belt of people, right? And there's only a handful of true ones that are still involved with it. And I like to think that I'm still one of them that's still involved with the sport. I love the sport. The sport is my family. I was fortunate enough to go to Paula a couple weeks ago, the final round, and see
in California last national. It's 12 rounds. Is it still 12 rounds?
12 rounds outdoor series. Still going, and one of the best series we've ever seen. Right, both championships were decided on that day. Mm-hmm. Granted, it was 115 degrees out. We were miserable, but it was, for me. Yeah, I had a lot of emotional tears coming out of me that day, just because I ran into people I hadn't seen in 3 years. I've been in Canada for the last 3 years, so it was different. But yeah, back to the kind of
make your transition, Loretta Lynn's, Englishtown.
So Englishtown was kind of a coming out party, right? Like, Jeff Emig at that time was, number 47. I remember having to throw an X on my bike, all bummed out, and I raced against him. And Donnie McGordy, it was 40-man gate. It was stacked, and I'm like, all right, well, let's see what we can do here.
40-man gate means 40 riders.
40 riders, and it was the only one of the only 90-degree turns. So it was super sharp. You had to get to that first turn or you were crashing.
And honestly, big balls, big chips. There's nothing more nerve-wracking, Griff, Ben, than 40 guys lined up. And the cards, they don't know this, but your card goes sideways.
You got 5 seconds till the gate drops.
And everybody's lined, and they all have to go into a pipeline.
That's like this wide, like literally this wide.
And usually there's, bodies going everywhere, most especially in the lower amateur ranks. These guys are like...
Well, there still is in the big bike. I mean, every time at Englishtown, there was a pileup, because that was one of the only 90-degree turns out of a first turn. It was such a long straight, too. You're like, God, get me to the first turn first, please.
Yeah. And so, but the court, we even worked on that. It's crazy, Griff, how everything is correlation. I was like, Nikki, it's a start. Like, get out of your head that you can't win the whole shot, and win the whole shot means to be the first one there. He's like, Charles, he calls me Charles. Back in the day, everybody was Charles. He's like, Charles, it's harder than what you think. I'm like, no, it's not. I teach 40 speed every day. Start, stand, stop, first step. So if you don't get off good, you don't finish well. It's too short. The whole shots in 40s, if you don't start right, you don't end right. Yeah. You have to have a good, correct me if I'm wrong.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%.
So I was always like, it's just a start. And I swear on my father's grave, when Whitey and I went to race, and I was like, I'm going to get the whole shot. And everybody was like, what do you mean you're going to get the whole shot? I'm like, it's just a start. Like, it's just a start. So, and I was totally out of it. So it was like, turn off. Like, it doesn't matter, but I'm going to get the start. Whitey's like, all right, get the start. I remember Chuck Spearman and Brian White. Chuck Spearman was a quarterback at UTC, and Whitey, and they were with me like I was Nick Evennou. You know what I'm saying? Like, towel, everything. I'm like, now, this is funny, Nicky. You'll love this. After I get the start and everybody's behind me, I'm not pulling off, but I'm laying down and letting some go, because I'm not sitting out front and getting run over because I can't race like I used to race. But the start is just a straight line. I could teach. That's how I thought. Inside line, I was like, here I go. I'm going to get it. And I just got it. I remember at 32 or 33, I was like, I got the start. And then I was the first one there. And I remember I did just enough to go like that. And I was like, it's just a start. But they always, in this, it was so mental for the right racers, because you usually had like Mike Alessi, whole shot guy.
Well, you think, you just think about other people. That's the problem, and I was really guilty of it. I just thought about other people rather than thinking about myself and what the goal was. And that was the worst. And that's how bad I was. And it's transcended into a big part of my life, is just confidence has never really been a big thing in my life. I've always lacked confidence. And I know for a fact that's why my career didn't, stem to maybe quote unquote what it should have been. But again, everything happens for a reason, and I'm the man I am today for those reasons. So
he was, but I will say this: always bitching, never good enough, always making excuses. And I remember yelling at him in the trucks, like if we went to mountain bike or whatever. And it was so much harder, Griff. I was so much harder, because I didn't turn my life over to Jesus till 2006 or 7. So I was almost like, I was a different cat then. I was a harder cat, a very harder cat. And I was like, stop being a punk. Your false ass bravado. I got all this written down of the stuff I was telling him. And I was like, no, you see things of what you have. Be grateful for what you have, not what you don't have. And we talk about that on our podcast all the time. It's like, if everybody just kept it that simple and just thought about that. And I was like, if he had that click, Ashland Patel.
Bingo. You got it. That's exactly who it is. Ashland. Yep.
I don't know how I met with him. I remember it last night.
Him.
So there was a guy here that was coaching some of the tennis pros over here. And you know this from tennis, your history with that. Again, head case, head game, talents there. It's the head. And there was a guy that Steve Anico, the tennis pro here at the time, introduced me to. And I really liked him. He was from Colorado, I think, but he was here studying, getting his master's in sports psychology. And I was like, man, I could really use you with this one cat. And I was like, okay. And then he started flying with me to the races. And he was such a kind soul and a good dude. I remember flying a couple times and hitting turbulence. And he was talking me through that with his knowledge of what he did.
Yeah,
and
everything he did was just made you feel better.
Yeah, and then he branched out and started traveling with him, and I was out. Yeah. You know, I thought that was cool, but that was his thing for me, in my opinion. And it was so frustrating because the kid could flow. And then we get into the other stuff. I remember first putting him on a mountain bike or a road bike, Griff, and I was like, you know, you're faster on pedals than you are, like, you're a freak. You're going to be a freak. Oh, Charles, what are you talking about? Charles, what are you talking about? And all of a sudden, you know, you're looking at him on Facebook, winning this championship, that championship, and look at the kid. I was telling Dr. James Chu in here today, who's, you know, Freddie's best friend in here. Freddie Smith is our Xterra guy out here that I had since high school with Chad Pennington. It was Chad Pennington, Chewy, and Freddie Smith that I trained from high school all the way to now. Well, he's like Xterra champ, road bike champ. He's, you know, 43 now. The best of the best, the fastest guy I've ever seen. Pictures on the wall. I told Chewy this, and I told people in my corner last night, this kid could beat him backwards. And I hope Freddie's listening. He has no shot because he's designed, he's wired. Look at his calves, how vascular. Look at his quads. I mean, Daniel Batuli, who's a hell of a linebacker here at UT and a monster with the Rams and Panthers, he was like, am I making it up? No. He lifted up his leg just to go, these skinny legs right here. And he's like, he looks like diced up. He's a Harrison Smith of cycling, in my opinion. And I saw that, Griff, at 14. I was like, okay, motocross may get in his head a little bit. This kid he doesn't even know, because he's probably forcing motocross, like forcing it a little, where he's like, all right, well, mountain bike, road bike, whatever. And he was a natural, an absolute natural. And it was amazing to watch. And then the transformation when everybody was like, check on Facebook of how he's going. And it was like,
yeah, because awesome. You put me, when we were mountain biking, you were, and I look back at it now, I'm like, you were mean to me, but you put me on a single speed. Remember? You're like, you're going to ride a single speed. That's it. That's the only thing you're riding with us is a single speed. And I remember all the boys were all on geared bikes, 2x, and I'm on a single speed. And I remember suffering, just going, I got to do this. And I will attribute all of my cycling, let's not call it success, because I raced in California for a couple years. I did some fun things. I got to the elite level, but realized that I needed to go to the next step. But I also wanted a family, and obviously certain things get in the way of business. But yeah, I at that time, I look back at that single speed and I'm going, that was the best possible thing you could have done for me. It was put me on a single speed at 14, 15 years old and just smash, or, not smash and carry it up the hills or whatever I had to do. And I remember that bike, like, it's what is like a rigid steel frame. And
they're out back.
They're still here. They're still here.
I know we got to wrap a few things up. Our guy has to run, Ben, but honestly, we could do,
we haven't scratched the surface.
Oh my gosh, we got to do a 2-part. So we could do a 2-part whenever. You're always welcome at my house. You could always come down now that, things are lifted or whatever, but you're always welcome, and we could wrap it. We could wrap it up. There's so much to this that he's going to unload on the documentary with Griff. That's going to be amazing of some of the things he's done. But I just want to get into this. I'm so proud of you, of the person you are, your wife, your kid. I love watching my people at young age become men, and it's so rewarding. Brian White, who I was just FaceTiming and handling 3 kids, and even watching you last night. I got to put the baby down, going back up the stairs, downstairs. I was doing that stuff, and you were around when I was doing, and you were there holding Grayson or playing with Ashlyn and watching all. This is what we talk about, Griff. It's an impact, not an impression. It's an impact of like, he'll remember things when I'm dead and gone. Oh, I said this. Oh, I said this. That's when I know my gift was what I'm doing. And that's why I'll never franchise. I'll never have a sign. Like Chad Pennington said, if I have the opportunity of burying Patron, it's not the wood gym, it's the man in it. And I think I'll die in here or in a mountain bike ride, one of the two, because I think I'm really fast. But real quick with a funny one, he pulled up to my house and I had the Ghost, my old Yukon, with my bike on there. And he goes, "You still have the same bike from 2000. It's the same bike." I was like, "Yeah, no. I've had brand new bikes in the garage, and I have people take them home and pick one out." And Bike Zoo Jeff is like, "I got a brand new one for you. I just can't pull the trigger." And it's not the money thing. It's like I'm not worthy of it, Griff. You know, I want to stay as humble so I don't stumble. And I'll end it on that, Nikki. And I love you to death. And we could chop it up. We're going to do a part 2. And I think we started where we are. We'll know where we are, and we could pick it back up and take you into what you're doing now, incredible things, and finding your way and struggling. The guy was homeless in California for 4 months. Okay. And the stories he told me yesterday of 4 motorcycle accidents on the freeways in LA, you go between. I mean, you were blowing Batuli away with these stories. He has stories, Griff, that you gotta be kidding me. And he persevered, and he had a woman that stuck by him for those 4 months. So kudos to you. I love you dearly. I wish the best for your family. And now that I know your dad's still cooking up there, I'm going to shoot up there for a weekend and stay in that hotel I stayed in one time. And
you just stay at our house.
And by the way, real quick. This has my name on it, Charles Patron. Okay. See the back of it?
I do.
Okay. Secret Service agent.
Yeah. Rick Nord.
Oh, yeah. Sent me that a long time ago. Rick Nord. He's another one you got to get. All right, everybody. It's been great. Nikki, thanks so much. I love you so much.
Love you too. Thank you.
I love you guys. It's been a long time since we've seen each other. And we'll get back on it now because this shit's good for the soul. It makes you feel good. Over and out, baby.
Cheers. Thank you so much.